All right, to everyone watching live, thank you for joining our event today. So lucky to be joined today with Kevin, Joyce, and Terry Cuddy, both founding members of Atlas to Blue and many other impressive background. Today we'll be talking around a very interesting topic that has seen a lot of global attention recently, which is carbon farming, and specifically the role of that carbon farming play in reversing climate change. How interesting and how big is this topic? If you have any questions or thoughts that come up during this session, please drop them in the chat. We will have some dedicated time, and hopefully it will be enough due to the difficulties we have earlier to answer all the questions that we receive at the end of the event. We are keen to have the discussion as well in the chat. So if there is, if you have a question that you believe you want to ask us or ask anyone else from the attendee, feel free to keep the chat engaged. Ask yourself, ask other people, answer some questions, and let's get this dialogue open between all of us. To start the session, Terry, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and your journey in the carbon space itself.
Thanks, Mo. I guess my background is coming to the organisation is many years around developing major programs in infrastructure, particularly with government and different levels of government. And also I've been in the past chair of a couple of major environmental organisations, and in recent times with Kevin identified the opportunity to create Atlas to Blue based on remarkable technology, which Kevin can outline shortly. But I guess that's very much a simplified overview of me.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Terry. Kevin, an impressive background, portfolio. I've been checking really all of the great work you have been doing recently. If you don't mind, share with us today more about yourself, what you have been doing, and more about your carbon journey itself.
So thanks, Mo. My background really, I guess, is we've been providing products to more or less the regenerative agri businesses for a number of years now, and regenerative ag is more or less an interchangeable terminology to carbon farming, and it was an easy transition to move our product line and our focus, I suppose, into carbon farming. So of late, probably over the last couple of years during the COVID years, we had a lot of time to go and look at opportunities in carbon and carbon markets, and we've been able to, I guess, offer a fair bit of expertise around that sort of area.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I think we should start digging into it and speak about our topic for the day, starting, which is, what is carbon farming? Kevin, if you don't mind carrying on and telling more the audience a quick introduction about what is carbon farming and what we should know about the space itself.
Okay. Simply put, carbon farming is really about either mitigating carbon, greenhouse gases that are released through agriculture, or in fact removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere using agriculture. So there are two sides of the same model. In reducing greenhouse gases, most people will probably be familiar, because it's quite often in the press, is about methane gases from livestock farming. You can, in carbon farming, as a livestock producer, you can mitigate the amount of methane that's coming from your livestock. There are different methods for doing that. The second part of it is really to sequester or remove those greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. The most common one is probably carbon dioxide. And so carbon dioxide is actually naturally removed from the atmosphere by plants. And so the functions of carbon farming are to look at practices that improve the amount of carbon dioxide that the plants can sequester or absorb, and not release it back out into the atmosphere again. So, and that comes down to really two, again, branches off into two separate streams, and one is what is called biomass. And if you look out into a forest, or that's what you're looking at. You're looking at biomass, and each of those trees is actually made from carbon, and it's made from carbon that's removed from the atmosphere. So, in carbon farming, it's actually to reduce that, produce forests and forestry, and maintain forests that hold on to carbon for an indefinite period of time. And even if that forest was actually harvested itself for wood, that wood still is contained in a house or in some sort of structure or a table, and that carbon remains out of the atmosphere. So it's quite a long-term sequestration of carbon dioxide. The other part of it is in cropping, where you grow a crop and that crop moves carbon from the atmosphere into the soil, and the soil biology then take over and store that carbon away in the soil. And again, that's a long-term storage, and the science behind all of that is really the focus of what we've been working on.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. With the crops, etc., are these considered as method of carbon farming? For example, Kevin, if you want to add more about those kind of methods, how it's used, and what does, if you want to bring it back to Atlas to Blue itself, and we're going to speak about this one later on today, what method does Atlas to Blue use specifically, and why as well, or A to B carbon as well?
Atlas to Blue is, I guess it's covering a more holistic approach to carbon farming. So we actually have protocols or methodologies, as they're called in businesses, to do soil organic carbon, which I'll explain in a bit further, or some of the other things that I just mentioned. So we can do livestock, yes. We can do pasture, we can do forestry, and another one called blue carbon, which involves the sort of mangroves and things like that. But our initial focus has been on what's called soil organic carbon, and soil organic carbon is this natural process, as I mentioned earlier, it starts with photosynthesis, and the viewers probably remember back in high school, if you haven't been familiar with photosynthesis, it's basically just it takes carbon dioxide and water and produces a carbohydrate. So it produces sugar into the plant, and that sugar is called glucose. And in my view, glucose is the most important molecule that's a compound that's formed in the planet, because that glucose builds everything that the plant, the way the plant grows is built from that glucose. Everything that we eat starts as glucose. We're made from carbon, and that carbon that all animals and all plants come from starts with the glucose. So that glucose is used to build biomass, as I described before, so the plant itself above the ground. But in a crop that's grown and then harvested and then taken off the field, and then another crop grown again and all that sort of stuff, the remaining carbon sequestration is what's actually stored in the soil. So those plants do that in a very natural way. Most current farming practices don't store carbon in the soil because they're actually a little bit destructive to the soil biology. And the only way you can store carbon is to have healthy soil biology that can take that carbon from the plant. The plant hands out carbon as a food source for the biology. The biology take that, multiply, live and die in the soil, and they leave that carbon behind that they were made from and that they actually ate. So we won't get into the huge technology around all that, how that all works, but it sequesters down meters into the soil. So, and it stays there for 100 years, and that's taking the carbon dioxide that's in our atmosphere and putting it back in the ground where it belongs.
Oh, perfect. I mean, it's an interesting a very interesting topic, and definitely you can spend lots of time on it. One thing you just mentioned that it's more interesting to me, because I mean we are all made from carbon. I've always been having this growing with the knowledge that we are made from soil and we will go back to soil as well. But now it's a bit more of the carbon aspect of the soil itself. Terry, if I will switch it back to you, and speaking about, for example, the recent climate change conference 27 that happened last month in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, there was heavy focus on decarbonization, carbon removals, etc. From your point of view, what role does carbon farming play here in achieving this objective or any potential global climate goals? If you mind, shedding some lights on this.
Okay, Mo, yeah, not a problem. I think in terms of COP27, we need to go back to the year before, COP26. So COP26 was really a defining moment in that it was the one time when all of the nations agreed to sign on to the Glasgow Pact, which was to then agree to make the next decade a decade of action on tackling climate. Now, what had happened in the lead up to COP26 is that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, had done a lot of research, and effectively leading up to COP26, they were basically saying that their studies were showing that we were failing in a global effort to reduce global warming, and that the world had to now start to consider other mechanisms to deal with climate change. And the best way to do that was to remove carbon dioxide from the air, and the most effective way to do that was through basically, let's call it projects that get plants to take as much CO2 out of the air as possible and have that stored as soil organic carbon. There are a couple of things as to why they did that, and that is that, for example, I think a quick Google search would probably find that I think we're cutting down trees at the rate of 80,000 acres, or about 32,000 hectares every single day. So that's how much we're removing. So over a year, that's about 10 billion acres gets chopped down every year. So the world has got less and less means to store carbon. So at COP26, they basically agreed to a decade of action. What happened after that was, and then they basically tabled that countries should now give a focus to supporting projects to store carbon in the ground. So that was in November of last year. Then we got to February of this year, 2022, where the IPC basically tabled its report, and it said, well, effectively we had failed, and unless we actually make a determined effort, we're not going to keep global warming to 1.5, and we'll see tipping points in climate. Well, of course, 2022 now, we know is going to be the worst, most significant change in terms of climate that we've ever seen. It's been the hottest year in recorded history, and I think they've catalogued something like 100 plus 1 in 1,000 year weather events. So all of those lead into COP27, where COP27 started off as being potentially a disaster, where a lot of countries wanted to walk back on their commitments at COP26. And at COP27, the United Nations Environment Programme advised countries that they were not going to meet their targets for 2030 unless they actually started to do something significant. So what comes out of COP27 is a reaffirmation that the world really now has to get moving on storing as much CO2 into the ground as soil organic carbon as it can, because that'll be the soil has far greater capacity to hold carbon than the sky can. So it can absorb a lot. But the issue is to get going. And it's in that context that we went about creating Atlas for Blue as a global mechanism to start to try to do that.
Yes. So if I understanding correctly, from COP26 to COP27, there was this kind of shift of mindset of to support climate change, to support all this kind of effort. Is not enough just to continue turning and converting into renewable energies and changing all of this kind of change. We need to start also removing carbon. So we need to stop producing carbon as one thing and removing more to, so hopefully we can make it basically on time, since obviously we all start reacting super slow, and it took years till people start really seeing the reality. I mean, it's, if you are in Melbourne and you've seen this week, we're supposed to be middle of summer, and we took a turn back to winter. So but it's not only this, more and
That's
more.
right. And I think the other thing, Mo, COP27 talked about also that let's say the Western world was not necessarily looking what was happening in the developing world. And of course I mean, for example, Kevin's just recently returned from India, where this year India was just smashed by extreme weather. They've had massive crop failures. That's been mirrored in other countries around the world. There's been crop failures all over the place. Then you have the Philippines. The Philippines this year, for the first time in history, were hit by 2 1 in 1,000 year storms, and so their agriculture has been decimated as well. And these are the sorts of places and countries where we're chatting to get projects underway, because one of the benefits of our methodology is we give crops greater resilience to climate change.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, if we continue moving forward, definitely the focus between regulator, investment, etc., should continue remaining renewable. But now, as a result of COP27, it's clearly that also this focus should start shifting, or this money start driving into projects that support removing carbon from the air, putting it back into soil, etc. So it's an interesting space. Obviously, it's been there for quite a while now, but the interest start really coming in, and more would like to understand more about the space, which is bringing me to my following question. How effective is carbon farming? Is it really effective? Is it all the promises that it's been sharing, basically, will it happen, basically? Kevin, if you want to add on this.
Sure. I think that there's, in my personal view, there's no more efficient way and no more beneficial way to remove carbon dioxide from the air than to do it the way nature did it for millions of years before we came along and started doing agriculture. And agriculture has the means, the amount of land that's under agriculture right now and the various crops has more than enough means to remove carbon dioxide from the air. Sorry, my phone's ringing at the time. And the way to compensate against the emissions that are still occurring. You know, we could turn off all the emissions tomorrow, and there's the argument is the world would collapse because we'd have no vehicles, we'd have no industry, But we have to be able to. We have to mitigate that, as well as we have to take the step forward of removing more and more carbon dioxide. Now, you know, it's something that people would also maybe remember about, you know, we talk about carbon dioxide is mostly coming out of fossil fuels. Well, those fossil fuels are quite often forgotten that they were once plants. So we're burning what was a forest a few million years ago. We're putting it back into the atmosphere, and then now there's a way that for use nature, and it's a natural process, completely natural process, to put that carbon back into the plants, into forests, and into crops. And more importantly, the benefits, the on-flowing benefits of improving soil and the soil biology by adding carbon back into the soil is phenomenal. With yield increases, nutritional value increases, food security. You know, the population of the world is not getting smaller, and food security is another huge topic. And carbon farming addresses the food security issue hands down. So we quite often talk about it. There's no downside in carbon farming.
Yeah, I think it would just pick up on a couple of points there, Mo, and that is that what we are understanding is we're reaching a tipping point where the continued use of chemical fertilizers is becoming less effective. So farmers are starting to experience that they have to put more fertilizer on to get the same yield. And that's a clear part that goes to what Kevin was saying, is when you're doing that, you're killing the soil biology. And I'm just noticing that we've got people, for example, from the Philippines. So we know you have soils that have been under stress, and they've been using fertilizer for a long time, and the soils are all but depleted. And that has to be turned around. And the only way to do that is by actually storing far more carbon back into that soil to actually then also play a role in regenerating soil biology, which is a key part of our methodology. And in places like the Philippines, with some of the farm projects that we've been trialling there, you end up with results where they're getting much better crop results than they had, but at the same time, of course, you're going to see soil carbon build up below the ground. And I think that is the biggest single change, is very few people in agriculture and agronomists have really looked at the importance of soil.
Yes. I mean, from all what I'm hearing, there's lots of, there are many reasons as well, and either some of it's natural reasons and other reasons that we are forced to go there as fast as we can. But somehow, when I've been searching the topic during the last few weeks, there are some concerns from people. There's always this kind of sign, people concerned, they not seeing the full value of it, or they're not seeing why we should put lots of investment towards this side against other direction where investment can also be beneficial, can support the climate, etc. So Tori, if you don't mind just addressing or if you touch on some of the concerns that you are aware of it in practicing carbon farming, and I'm not sure if you have any insight on this.
Well, I think some of the concerns, I think that in what we're going to be doing through Atlas to Blue will help address that. But I think probably Kevin's got a more insightful sense of what the real challenge is, and I think that adoption starts with, I guess, with the farmers and their views of the world and where they're at. So perhaps probably better answered by Kevin.
Yeah,
Thank you, Terry.
That's 100% correct, Terry. I think the concerns are really emotional. I think all the farmers that I speak to, the biggest problem with changing the way or moving towards a carbon farming or a regenerative farming practice is to change what they've been doing for possibly generations on the farm. You know, those practices of tilling the soil. You know, since the plough was invented, we've been ploughing soil and turning the soil over. And turning the soil over is one of the most critical changes in carbon farming. So you speak to a farmer that's been tilling the soil since he owned the farm and say, you can't do that anymore, you better stop that. And he goes, well, how am I supposed to stop that? That's supposed to do all these other things that we've learned over the last 50 years, 100 years about tilling soils. That's why we till them. And you go, well, actually, the science has caught up somewhat and said tilling soil kills soil biology, and soil biology overcomes all the problems why we were tilling the soil in the first place. So So it's
There's
a change.
a lot of unlearning things that we learned it, and now we realize, okay, we should.
Sure, change is difficult in the best of times, for anybody to do, to change anything, and if your whole livelihood depends on your farm, and somebody comes along and says, well, you need to change that in order to do carbon farming, or to do regenerative farming, it's a real leap of faith. And that's, again, we switch back to what Atlas to Blue, we're providing that sort of knowledge and that sort of assistance. And there's, say, for instance, a crop soil organic carbon program, there's somewhere around 15 to 20 different practice changes you can make to take steps forward to build better soil biology or set better soil health for carbon sequestration. But you don't need to do all 15 of them at once. You can choose to do one that you're comfortable with. You can do two, or you can do it on a 20 hectares of your property. You don't need to do it on the entire property. It's baby steps, and farmers need to be comfortable to do it, or it won't happen. And the farmers' profitability needs to be maintained. There's a lot of talk about sustainable farming, and I always sort of refer to that as sustainable income. It's got to be. You can't change your methods or your practices on the farm if you're going to risk your income, and it's our job as organisations like Atlas to Blue, and our focus is to simplify it, make it transfer the knowledge and assist on the way through in all sorts of areas, which we can get into in future.
I think the other element, Kevin, I suppose maybe we can also sort of reveal here that we are going to be releasing, I think, what we're calling Atlas AI, which is effectively a significant artificially intelligent database, a data engine that will actually be able to provide farmers with access to information that relate to real projects that have been using our methodologies, and the outcomes that have been achieved, and we'll be going on the front foot in the sense that this is going to be transparent, and we're bringing the best science and the absolute best measurement systems to bear to actually validate that we're getting the results that we're getting. I mean, we're looking at, for example, say in Iowa, where the state government there is looking to pilot programs around the restoration of native grasses, and some of the prairie grass have roots that go down 3 metres. So we'll be looking to achieve significant carbon outcomes at levels deeper than 30 centimetres, where most everybody else will be looking. So we'll be looking at this issue of deep carbon, but we'll be bringing to bear the best tools, the best mechanisms of measuring and monitoring that. We'll be using blockchain technologies to help authenticate those things, and in that way, making those sorts of tools available, we're allowing farmers and communities to get access to information that they've never seen before in that regard, and that will make a big difference.
No, it's great. So, I mean, if I want to summarize some of those concerns, obviously knowledge and education is a big part of it. But then this adoption fear or feeling that there is 15 to 20 practices that I need to change. But in fact, actually, you just need to start with one, you could test it in specific area of your farm. You don't need to go all in, and you can just, as I said, take step by step till you get there, until you start diversifying your income without affecting the main. So it's much easier to actually start than many people think, in fact. And this, from what, I believe it's great to know as well.
I think, Mo, just to pick up on that, because I am aware that we've got people that are sending us questions. For our friend in the Philippines, we are certainly looking to the Philippines, but it's an issue that, Mo, we're looking at this from the perspective of programs and projects that can deliver the outcomes, can work with farmers and communities locally, but it is about using the methodologies that we've developed that are going to get the results. So it's not simply a case of selling a product. It's going to be about how you go about those sort of changes in a systematic way.
Yes. And I believe in this case, the farmers, which is the key part of carbon farming itself, they need to start learning more the benefit and the different way to enter the space itself. Given, from my understanding, currently you are working with a large number of farmers, and you have been working with them through Crop BioLife itself. Do you mind just sharing with us roughly the number of farmers or farms you've been working with, and what benefit they should expect that come directly from carbon farming practices?
We're currently selling Crop BioLife and have been selling Crop BioLife around the world. We're, I think it's 15 different countries at this point, and farmers from virtually everything from pasture, which, you know, with grasses, through to tree crops. The benefits, and I just want to just rewind slightly on one of the catalyst, I guess, that's getting attention, or giving attention to getting farmers to pay attention to carbon farming, and the catalyst is a carbon credit. So there's actually now an incentive to move to regenerative agricultural practices that do sequester carbon into the soils and regenerate your soil health, where previously it was really, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to make the environment better? Am I doing this to stop using some of the chemicals, or am I doing this to release or to reduce my input costs? There's a whole bunch of different commercial reasons why you may or may not move to carbon farming. But now there's an opportunity to actually sell the carbon credits that you're putting into the soil. And Terry was indicating before about the measurement. That comes down to pure measuring it accurately, and watching how that trends, and then collecting a carbon credit at the end, which is of real monetary value. You know, I recently was on a property that's got 10% carbon in its soil. Now, most soils around the world are probably under 2%. So clearly there's a lot of space to put more carbon into the soil. And just to put it into perspective, each 1% of carbon in the soil is equivalent to 143 tons of carbon dioxide, roughly. It depends on the weight of the soil, but so the statistics are there. So if you can, you know, do the math, you go and say, okay, well, if I can get to 10%, then I've stored a lot of carbon per hectare. That's 143 per hectare, by the way. And each one of those carbon tons is worth, you know, a monetary figure, which can generate a pretty reasonable income on a property. So that's a sort of a benefit for the farmer or an incentive for the farmer. The benefits for farmers in a lot of cases, like a lot of the people that we've been working with over the years, even before carbon credits were a thing, they moved to regenerative farming because of the reasons for removing chemistry from or chemicals, synthetic chemicals from their properties. Synthetic chemicals that cause poisoning. I have one customer who's come back to the farm to run the farm because his father was poisoned by the chemicals he was using, and he had to stop. He can't run the farm anymore. So there's a lot of benefit in removing that synthetic chemistry from farms, all of the herbicides and fungicides and pesticides that we have been spraying out there on food crops, believe it or not, too, which means it's a bit of an irony, I guess, in farming, that we're killing everything in order to grow stuff. So it's one of those things where if you can work with and carbon farming and regenerative farming is working back with nature, not trying to fight nature. If you're fighting nature, nature will always win. It figures out a way around it. You might kill off one pest in your farm and nature will bring on another one just in its place. So if you're working with balancing everything, you're talking about a diversification in what you're growing, and a diversification in all the insects that are on the property and things like that. Those benefits that removes the toxicity out of farming. There's benefits in all of the people that have gone and been running these projects for many years in regenerative farming. Just people like Gabe Brown, if you want to Google him and have a look at some of the things that he's done in the US. These people are their farms are very efficient, very effective, very profitable, and very risk managed. They're climate resistant, so different things can happen, different storm fronts or droughts. These crops are far more resistant to that than they were when they were being hammered with chemicals to grow them.
Yes, yes.
I think, Mo, just to pick up on a couple of points there that Kevin raises, is that, of course, farmers that move to these sorts of methods, first thing they're going to see is an improvement in the bottom line, simply because from 3 years ago through the pandemic, the price of fertiliser has tripled. So they are paying an extraordinarily high price to put chemicals on their grounds that's killing their soil biology. And then by moving to regenerative farming methods, they're going to see that they won't need to use anywhere near the amount of fertiliser they had in the past. And the other benefits you've got also, particularly when you use an Atlas to Blue method, is you're going to find that the plants are going to be far more resilient. When plants are more resilient, they are more resistant to pest attacks, so the need for pesticide reduces as well. So there are multiple benefits in that sense. And I think just probably not the other point I'd just pick up that Kevin touched on, that there's a lot of science out there that's telling you that one of the other clear benefits is that families who are farming will no longer experience the levels of sickness that they've had when they've been exposed to all the chemicals that they've been handling.
Wow, these are some massive benefits. We're speaking about a healthier farm from the farmers, their families, their livestock. We're speaking about saving money in purchasing fertilizers, etc., chemical that you put into the soil that can harm the soil itself. Speaking about a stronger crop that is can stand harsher weathers as well, storm, etc., and most importantly as well, a new stream of income through carbon credit or the carbon market itself. So it's also another produce for the farmers who potentially it's something they will be selling and benefiting from as well. Look, with this topic, I believe we can keep going. It's very interesting. I'm really enjoying learning more about it from both of you, and I hope the people watching us are enjoying the information. I understand for some this information could be, if they are in the space, these are the intro knowledge, this is the objective of this event. I just want to revisit the purpose of the event. We're trying to raise the awareness of the carbon farming itself, the practice of it, methods, benefit, and some concerns. With the time being, Kevin and Terry, if you don't mind, we will move to some of the Q&A from the people who've been sending and sharing the question there. As you know, we had some difficulties at the start of the event, so I'll move to some of the questions that came through. First, quick hello to Michael Vadal. He's saying he's watching us all the way from the Philippines, and we just touched base on the Philippines as well. So thank you for joining. We have a question about saying it's not really a particular question, but they're interested to know the link between carbon farming and carbon credit. And I believe you just answered this one to Terry, but would you mind to quickly if you summarize the relationship? Yes.
Effectively, I mean, what we've done is we're developing some methods that are going to, first of all, accelerate the development of more soil organic carbon in the ground. So in a sense, our methods will get there quicker, and there will be a larger quantum as a result of that. And in measuring and actually authenticating that that's exactly what we're doing, we're then creating the case for producing what we would consider to be the highest value carbon credits you're going to get on the market anywhere in the world. So when I say that, we've conceived of Atlas to Blue as an organisation that will be doing this globally. So we're already identifying projects and programs in India. We're certainly looking, and we've been partnering some organisations and NGOs in the Philippines. United States, we're very much looking at project opportunities in the two major ag states there in Iowa and California. We're certainly looking at Australia. And then we've got other areas that we're looking at in terms of the Middle East. We're starting a discussion with the United Nations around how we might get to other developing countries. But the whole idea here is that by ensuring that we're delivering the best possible outcome and validating that we're getting the carbon outcomes that we've set out to achieve, which means that we are removing far more CO2 from the air than anybody else, then we are creating the pathway to generate high value, authentic and validated carbon credits.
Thank you, Terry, for this. Unfortunately, we run out of time. For everyone watching us, thank you so much for attending. We'll be running a follow-up live event. This time we will ensure that tech will be more prepared from the first get-go. The event will be on the 12th of January. In the next year, it's continuing the topic that we will be discussing today. It's the Carbon Market 101, where we'll speak more about the relationship between carbon farming, the carbon credit itself, and more around this topic itself. I'll be joined by Ross Jackson and Leanne Batts in that event. The event link will be shared soon, so please make sure to join us there. Terry and Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about Atlas to Blue project, or if you are interested to see how you can collaborate with the Atlas to Blue team, if you're in farming space, if you are in the carbon market itself, or if you are interested to join the project in one way or another, please feel free to reach out to Atlas to Blue itself, or follow their LinkedIn profile and visit their website, which is, I believe, will be shared with us shortly here. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and yeah, a pleasure to have you. Until the next time, thank you.
Sorry that we couldn't answer all of those questions. Some of them are really good that I saw go past. So maybe if you tried to contact us through LinkedIn and ask those questions again, we might be able to try and get you the answers.
Or as well, we may continue carrying on the conversation on the chat of the event itself. So yes, keep an eye, but yeah, feel free to reach directly to Kevin, Terry on their LinkedIn, or by visiting Atlas to Blue website itself. And yeah, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you. Thank you very much.